It's my very great pleasure to welcome all of you to the forum tonight, and I would like to thank Dean Elwood and Bill Purcell for inviting me to do this and to be part of this celebration of public service. I'm very honored to welcome all of you and to welcome Governor Patrick to this very special event during our Public Service Week. You'll hear more about the governor from Dean Elwood, but I too would like to say a few words about the governor and about why his being here during Public Service Week is so significant. Now, I and perhaps many of you have come to know the governor best as the leader of our state, but prior to becoming governor of the Commonwealth, he served local and national and international communities at various points in his career, as a volunteer, as an attorney, and as a senior government official. Indeed, public service has been a central dimension of both his professional and his personal life. This governor's administration has invested heavily in a number of areas that are of enormous importance to us and to what we see as the wider mission of public service: the life sciences, clean energy, healthcare, education, the very sectors that can lead Massachusetts out of its recession. The administration has also invested more in education and in rebuilding the state's roads and bridges and in public and affordable housing than any other administration in the history of the Commonwealth. So the governor's example as a public servant, as an actor in public service, and as the leader of our state reminds us what is possible when we dedicate our time and our talent and our energy to a cause that is bigger than any single one of us. So thank you, Governor, for joining us tonight, and thank you for all you have done. Governor Patrick's choices in his life embody a choice to serve. It's a choice that we want this week especially to make more visible, more possible, and more inspiring to all our students. This is a choice that is at the heart of what the Harvard Kennedy School is about. Ask not, says the Harvard Kennedy School. Ask not what you can do. Ask what you can give. Ask what you can contribute. Ask how you can be a part of the larger public service mission. So I want to acknowledge that while Public Service Week takes place all across Harvard's campus, I feel that I am in the heart of the mission of public service as I stand here before you in the forum. The Kennedy School's mission for public service is at the core of its teaching, its research, its volunteer efforts that it makes at home in the United States, efforts like helping to rebuild New Orleans and spearhead preservation efforts for our nation's national treasures, or efforts even more local here in Boston and Cambridge, like those you will all undertake tomorrow in the Harvard Kennedy School Day of Service. Beyond our borders, the Kennedy School serves the mission of public service as well, educating and training students from more than 80 countries. As a former Kennedy School dean, Graham Allison, once put it, public policy and management do not stop at the water's edge. The international dimension of the school's teaching, research, and its student body are integral components of the school's central mission. Under David Elwood's leadership, the Harvard Kennedy School has served as a model for all of us at Harvard in its commitment to the greater good and to what David often calls public solutions. And I think we need to remember, too, that David Elwood himself has been a distinguished public servant and government employee, a model for us as well. President Kennedy once wrote, "The educated citizen has an obligation to serve the public. He may be a precinct worker or a president. He may give his talents, at the courthouse, the State House, the White House, and I'm sure that President Kennedy would be saying he or she if he were alive today. He may be a civil servant or a senator, a candidate of a campaign worker, a winner or a loser, but he must be a participant and not a spectator. Tonight, we celebrate those who participate, and both Deval Patrick and David Elwood are prominent among them. I give you the Dean of the Kennedy School, David Elwood.
Well, thank you very much, Drew, and it has really been very exciting to see the university come together during this week of public service, and it's been a remarkable series of events and more to come. And though I must say, one of the our local school newspaper here is called The Citizen, and one of the reporters asked me a question. He sort of said, you know, there's a lot going on, but you know, does it make you feel bad or good that this week actually doesn't look that different from other weeks at the Kennedy School? Needless to say, I thought that was a good thing. But we don't ever very often get to have the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we especially don't get to have a man quite as remarkable as this governor of the state of Massachusetts. So, as President Faust said, he really is a model in many respects for the kinds of ways in which people can contribute and so forth. He has a really quite compelling personal story. He was raised in a loving home, but under very difficult economic circumstances in Chicago. And his mother and grandmother stressed the importance of hard work as a way to success. And he too was inspired by the leadership of others, of public leadership. And indeed, early on in his life, his mother brought him to hear Dr. Martin Luther King speak and in a Southside Chicago park. And of that event, the governor has said, I remember feeling connected to all those people who were like me, of limited means but limitless hope, people who build whole lives on hope. Governor Patrick was able through education, he came to Milton Academy and came to Massachusetts, and it was at Milton he found himself beginning to engage in a whole variety of different communities and a particular skill of bringing people together from different backgrounds. He was one of the very few black students on campus at the time, but he had a desire to learn and to bridge communities of various types. And then he came to Harvard. And he lived at Dunster House, and he honed his speaking skills. He was the Toastmaster at house events. But this wasn't all about speaking. It was about service. And indeed, upon graduation, he spent a year in service in Sudan, working on a UN development project. Came back to law school, back to Harvard, this time in the law school, and he led the Legal Aid Bureau. After law school and a clerkship, Governor Patrick joined the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, where he focused on voting rights and capital punishment cases. And he spent time in private practice as a partner at the firm of Hill & Barlow, but always kept one foot in public service. And he spent much of his time on pro bono work, including the landmark lending scam case on behalf of Massachusetts Governor. He also served as the volunteer chair of the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund and as a member of its National Board of Directors. And then, in 1994, became the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Justice. At Justice, he prosecuted hate crimes, focused on enforcing laws related to employment and discrimination and so forth. And we're just into the mid-1990s. After leaving the Justice Department, he went on to serve in the private sector, serving as the first chairperson of Texaco's Equity and Equality and Fairness Task Force. Ultimately, Texaco hired Governor Patrick as a vice president and general counsel in 1999. He then moved on to Coca-Cola, and forgive me for this, where he forged consensus on sticky issues by bringing people together. But one of the wonderful things is he now came back to Massachusetts and back to the public sector rather, and chose to run for governor in 2006. And in a four-way race, he won 56% of the vote. Drew Faust has already mentioned his priorities on a whole variety of fields focused on the future, whether it's clean energy or the life sciences. And it's also focusing on infrastructure and job training. And now during this difficult time, when budgets around the country are in great, great distress, Governor Patrick constantly reminds us of the people, of the faces, of the lives that are at stake here, not simply the numbers at the bottom line. So it is my great pleasure to welcome tonight Governor Deval Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I want to first thank President Faust for her very generous comments and for her leadership of this extraordinary university during these extraordinary times. I know she must ask herself in private moments whether being president of Harvard at this time is quite what she thought it might be. I want to say that because I certainly understand the sensibility. I'll say more about that in a minute, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciate what she is dealing with and the grace with which she's doing so. I want to thank you also, Dean Elwood, for the gracious introduction, the generous comments, to you and your team at the Kennedy School and at the Institute of Politics for having me back at the school. It is almost always good to be here. Almost always good. I say it that way because I remember a particularly uncomfortable debate early in the campaign, right in this space, sitting under these unbelievably hot lights while the makeup that had been applied melted. And I was afraid to wipe my face for fear of making it worse. I want to say a special thanks to the folks from Phillips Brooks House Association, who also urged me to come tonight and from whose counterparts in an earlier time, when I was an undergraduate member of PBHA, I learned a lot about what it means to serve. What an exceptional and enduring organization. And I want to thank you for what you do for the larger community and what you have meant to this one for so long. Now, I'm hoping we can spend most of our time this evening in conversation, but let me make just a few comments for context at the outset so you know where I'm coming from. I want to first of all commend the university for creating a way to acknowledge public service by designating a public service week. The subject is timely, though I have to admit that like many of my colleagues around the country, a lot of people wonder aloud why anybody would want to be a governor today. I will admit that there were a few things that I did not anticipate. I knew there would be close media scrutiny, but I did not anticipate that sometimes I would be left feeling that if I walked on water, the headline splash would be, "Patrick can't swim." I knew that change would come slowly, but I did not anticipate that we would sometimes have to do hand-to-hand combat with members of my own party. I knew that resources would be tight, but I did not anticipate a global economic collapse. Fear and pain and the level of displacement that it has spread across and through a normally proud and resourceful Commonwealth and nation. We are in crisis. We have only the barest appreciation, it seems to me today, of how close we were to full-blown depression just a year ago at this time, with the potential of the banking industry to sink into a deep hole and drag all the rest of the economy with it. Kudos to the Obama administration, to the actions of Chairman Bernanke and the Fed in the previous administration, and to many, many others for pulling us back from the brink. That is no joke. No joke. Notice that we are talking about what kind of recovery and how fast it will come today, when just a year ago, many wise observers were wondering whether there was a future for our economy. Don't get me wrong, in many ways we are still in crisis. We are still in crisis in many homes, in many workplaces, in many, many lives. But crisis, in my view, is also a platform for change. And in Massachusetts, we have changed a lot. We have closed an $8 billion budget gap so far and delivered 3 budgets that were responsible, transparent, balanced, and on time, not something that every state can say. We reformed the state pension system, tightened the ethics and lobbying rules, radically simplified the transportation network, reduced everybody's auto insurance premium rates by introducing competition, and joined 49 other states by introducing civilian flaggers instead of police officers to state construction sites. Changes people have been clamoring for in our Commonwealth for over 20 years, but that we have delivered. We have invested in IT, the life sciences, clean tech, and healthcare, the very industries many experts say are leading Massachusetts out of the recession faster and stronger than the rest of the United States. Our students have scored first in the nation for the third year in a row on the national achievement tests, and we have invested more money in education, roads, and bridges, expanding broadband and refurbishing public and affordable housing than ever before in our history. Over 97% of the men, women, and children in our Commonwealth have affordable health care today and don't have to worry about going bankrupt because they get sick. Not another state in the country can touch that record. And people can marry whomever they love here in Massachusetts, too. So a lot of change has happened in the midst of this crisis because we have kept our focus on building better tomorrows. There is more to accomplish, to be sure, but it bears remembering that change can happen through public service in spite of headwinds, political or economic. We lost Senator Edward Kennedy late in August. And in the days after, as we celebrated and in many cases marveled at his remarkable record of achievement over nearly 50 years in the United States Senate, I kept thinking how much of what he accomplished happened against enormous odds, political opposition, even demagoguery, personal mistakes and missteps, economic ups and downs. And yet, because he had a vision of a better America and kept working for that, not only did he endure, but America herself is better. Growing up as I did in poverty on the south side of Chicago, in some ways makes this economic crisis feel almost familiar. I know what it's like to be uncertain about tomorrow, to be unable to predict tomorrow based solely on what happened yesterday. I know what it's like not to have enough money, enough food, to have to improvise and to lean on others just to get over. I know what it's like to have your life upended by the unexpected. And I also know how not to let that be my only reality. I see the suffering and the anxiety around us today. Who couldn't? I see the faces and the families behind every one of the line items on the spreadsheets that I review over and over again with my team, the human and social damage that the economy has caused. But I also know how not to curl up in the fetal position and just wait for better times. I know how to imagine a better Commonwealth and to move forward to that. That is what we are about in my administration and why we have accomplished, I believe, as much as we have. And frankly, that is what a second term will be about should the people of the Commonwealth so choose. The truth is that public service in the broadest sense may be a balm for all the fear and the pain, all the uncertainty and disruption of our current economic distress. Maybe public service today will drive us to a spiritual recovery as well as an economic one. Service stirs us. It brings meaning and purpose to our lives. It's an affirmation of our common humanity, of our stake in our neighbors' dreams and struggles, as well as our own. Only a fool would say it's easy. It takes courage and character in our modern culture to see beyond our own interests, to recognize the need in someone else's life, and then to take action to try to make a difference. In a time where so many submit to finger-pointing and blame, it's an extraordinary thing to witness someone who not simply identifies the problem, but also the solution and then owns it. But there are stories all around government that reflect that spirit. I see it in the much maligned state employees who take unpaid furlough days and come to work anyway to serve the public. I see it in the cities and towns where cash-strapped governments are relying more and more on the volunteerism of their citizens. Their example affirms that we are all in this together, for better or worse, and that in any intact community, large or small, as I say, we have a stake in our neighbors' dreams and struggles as well as our own. And yet I also know that change and progress is not up to me or to government generally, but up to you. Political leadership is just one form of public service, not the only or even the most important form of service. There is military service and diplomatic service. There is business and not-for-profit service. There is service in the community, in the schools, in our houses of worship. There is the greatest form of service, in my view, in a democracy at least, which is active, informed citizenship. But the point is service takes all forms and must, because the challenges we face in this Commonwealth and this country today are so profound, so transformational, that service to the greater good is more important than ever. In a famous sermon called The Drum Major Instinct, Dr. King described service as only he could. He said, everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. He said, you only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Love, something you don't always hear in public life, but must motivate service. And he was right. People will try to tell you otherwise. For every voice of hopelessness, there is a chorus of cynics out there waiting to shout you down. For every soul with the courage to act on their convictions and bring solutions to our world, there is an avalanche of negativity waiting to crush it. For every pragmatic idealist searching for the beautiful ties that bind, there is always a flock of fearmongers peddling doubt and derision. It was ever thus. And I ask you not to listen to them, because now more than ever we need you and your sense of responsibility for one another to lead us to the better tomorrows ahead. We need dreamers and entrepreneurs, visionaries and teachers. We need your exuberance and your honesty to push us ever forward. We need you to articulate what the world should look like, and then to work with us, all of us together, to make it so. And we need to be mindful of the policy markers. But I will tell you, a wounded planet in need of healing doesn't care what the unemployment rate is. Victims of domestic violence don't care what happened on Wall Street today. Second graders in crowded classrooms don't care about budget cuts. The mentally ill and developmentally disabled and the people who love them and work with them, they don't care about which Republican scolded which Democrat or vice versa. Our need is too great and too personal in many ways, for us to be either distracted or seduced by policy points and statistics, let alone by headlines and gossip. Our need demands what is best in each of us and a willingness to give it generously to others. Some of you have heard me tell you about a visit I paid to the high school in Brockton, Massachusetts. It's the largest high school in our Commonwealth. 4,100 young people go to that school. 64% are on the free lunch program. For nearly half, English is a foreign language. I visited the school in the spring to announce some of the federal stimulus funding for education and arranged to meet beforehand with the parents of some of the special needs students in Brockton. And I sat with about a dozen of those parents in the school library, surrounded in the perimeter of the room by members of the student council who had been invited to observe. And at first we talked about policies and programs and information and so on, but the conversation got very personal when one of the parents turned to me and said, "Governor, I wonder if you can imagine what it's like to have a child in this school who has no friends." And as a parent, the comment just seared right through me. And she went on to talk about how her child had such profound learning issues that he was shunned by other students in the school. And at that point, one of the student council members raised her hand and said, "You know what, I'd like to be a buddy for your child." And it was a beautiful moment. And then another parent said, "Well, that's very nice, but my child's in the grammar school, not here in the high school," which prompted another member of the student council to raise her hand, and say, "Well, why don't we create a program where we in the high school can be buddies for kids with special needs wherever they go to school in the Brockton system?" Absolutely gorgeous. They invented this program right there in front of us. The school superintendent did what school superintendents must do these days. He began to wring his hands and say, "Oh goodness, how will we pay for this?" Which prompted this amazing young man to raise his hand and say, "Wait a second, we don't need to be paid." He said, "This is our community. This is ours." His message was, if there's a need, send me. My point is that even in the bleakest places, people are hungry for a reason to hope and ready to offer themselves. And I think if we keep calling that out and lifting that up and honoring it and putting it to work, then our best days are ahead. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you very much, Governor, for that very moving and very thoughtful speech. We now come to the portion of our program where we welcome questions from the audience. There are microphones located in 4 places. One is right here, one is right there, one is right there, and one is here. Now, I just want to remind the audience of what a Kennedy School question characteristic it has. Number 1, you start by identifying yourself. You have one thought, one idea, and it's short, and it ends with a question mark. And so I was actually just at an event this noontime where I sort of said it's really hard to get people to ask the first question, so let's start with the second question. I don't see any problem getting people to ask first questions here, so let's start right here.
Great.
Good evening, Governor. Thank you very much.
Sure.
My name is Peter Blair. I'm a PhD student in the physics department here at Harvard.
Excellent.
And I wanted
Where are you from, Peter?
I'm from the Bahamas.
Excellent. I know you love January and February around here.
That's all right. I'm going home this weekend.
Why are you doing this to us?
We can invite you too. I wanted to ask you to share a bit about some of your experiences in public service as a young man, and how do you see those lessons informing the way that you lead today as the head of our Commonwealth?
Well, Peter, thank you for the question. Are you saying I'm not a young man anymore? Is that what you're saying? It seems like that. You mean long ago. Is that what you mean?
I don't want to get myself in trouble.
No, you're already there, Peter. Go on back to the beach if you have to. So I've had some amazing experiences and very formative, and I would say some of the most formative have been outside the sort of public notice. Some of the most compelling service was in Darfur 30 years ago. You know, Darfur was a very different place then. Very few Americans went there. To get there in those days, you had to buy space on top of a lorry, a market truck in the Omdurman souk, and bring enough food and water for the trip across the desert for 5 days. There was no mail or phone service. I remember not being in touch with my family for 6 months. If my children tried this, I would kill them. I remember, when I was not fluent in the language when I went there. I could speak it by the time I left. I couldn't write it, but I could communicate. But at the beginning, I couldn't. I was traveling with a Sudanese guy my age who was about as comfortable in English as I was in Arabic. But what I found in that experience is that in order to serve effectively, our work was very personal. That you had to understand the policy framework, but you had to get out of the policy framework to see where policy touches people. And so I have been very keen about understanding that in my jobs, understanding where policy touches people, and does it touch people the way it's intended, in the way that's most effective, in the way that honors the dignity in every human being. And I find, by the way, and I think of probably any governor or any person associated with a large enterprise, a large bureaucracy, that is harder and harder to do the larger the organization becomes. And so one of the things that I try to pay attention to is whether we are appointing people who understand that sensibility so that we're triaging that idea out into the organization. Is that what you were getting at?
Yes,
Okay,
Thank you, Governor.
thank you.
Right up here.
Good evening, Governor.
Hi.
My name is Molly Byrne, and
Molly?
I'm a Master in Public Policy student here at the Kennedy School.
Excellent. Where are you from, Molly?
I'm from upstate New York,
Okay. How far up?
almost in Canada.
Okay. So
My-
this feels like the Bahamas to you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Although I lived in Africa, so it's a
Never
little cold
mind.
for me now.
Okay.
My question is about the anti-trafficking legislation currently in the Senate and the House, most notably Senate Bill 58, which has been, a version of which was introduced almost 5 years ago, and it still hasn't passed into legislation.
The Massachusetts House you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Even though almost all other states have a version of anti-trafficking legislation.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, even though anti-trafficking, there aren't an abundance of cases here in Massachusetts, why is it important, if you're in favor of this bill, why is it important to pass that? What does that mean for the community of Boston and for the state to be able to pass anti-trafficking legislation?
Why don't you say, just so we bring everybody into the conversation, what the bill is about, just in case people don't know what anti-trafficking is.
So anti-trafficking, this bill, there's a federal bill on anti-trafficking, and the Department of Justice has issued bills, or an example of bills for states to pass so that they can persecute victims of trafficking, or sorry,
Prosecute.
prosecute
Yes.
the perpetrators of trafficking.
Some do
excuse
the
me.
other two, but yeah.
Yes. And this bill specifically sets up a trust fund for victims, as well as making it easier for state law enforcement officials to
Right.
prosecute.
Right. So the question is, why do I think it hasn't passed, or do I think it's valuable, important
Yeah.
that it does?
Do you think it's important, and is it something that you would support, and why is it important for Massachusetts?
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, I don't know a lot about that bill. I know about the issue of trafficking, because we dealt with some of this in the Justice Department when I was there, and I think it'd be wonderful to have some additional tools at the state level, because we couldn't do all that needed to be done at the federal level, and we were limited to those matters that cross state lines, and not all of the issues are about interstate commerce. You know the term. I can't tell you why it hasn't passed. The legislature, has its own rhythm, but let me leave it at that. I hope it does, and if it does, I'll sign it. If it's a good bill. If it's a good bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right up here.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Peter Witzler. I'm originally from Ohio, but I've lived in Massachusetts for 5 years now.
Excellent.
And I'm a mid-career MPA student here at the Kennedy School.
Great.
And I work with a coalition of groups called the Leadership Campaign. It's at 18 universities all across Massachusetts and community groups. And we realize that we're in a current global climate emergency that will require public service from everyone.
Right.
And yesterday at the
At UMass.
At UMass, exactly.
Right.
You had committed to meet with a group of us in the next 2 weeks, but all of our calls and emails to your office today have not been returned or
Oh,
responded
Peter,
to.
get real. Come on. I mean, I said I would have the meeting. I'll have the
Okay.
meeting. For goodness sake, give us, it's like we have the president coming tomorrow. We're a little busy right now.
Okay,
We love you, but we will have the meeting, really.
okay,
Okay?
great, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. I hope you don't mind if we can just be informal. All right? Do you? Okay? Okay.
Hi.
Right here.
Hey, hang on one second. Ambrose, where are you? So, can you get Peter's contact information? All right? And please have somebody call him tomorrow. Because I have this whole image of Peter and everybody standing in front of the motorcade tomorrow with a sign saying, "Where is our appointment?" I said I would meet with him. Okay? And I will. Okay? Great. So, did you see Ambrose through the lights? Okay. Good. Go ahead.
Right over here.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi, I'm Christian Newis. I'd like, my main concern, Governor, is, do you know when they'll establish the North-South rail link between Boston North Station and Boston South Station?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know when you'll help bring it up, if and when you'll ever help bring it about, contribute to it?
I heard the timing. What's the second part of the question?
Do you know? Do you know if and when you'll ever help contribute to it, help bring it about?
Okay.
The project,
Sure.
the North-South rail link.
Does everyone know what we're talking about, the north-south rail link? Does
Yeah.
anybody, do you want me to say a little bit about it, just to describe the project?
Sure, yes,
So
sure.
there's a proposal. Has it been around since Governor Dukakis? I can't remember.
I'm not sure. I think it has. I'm not sure.
I know he cares about it. There's a proposal to connect North Station and South Station with an underground tunnel under downtown Boston. And the reason it's important is because that rail path along the northeastern coast is a very vital economic link, very vital link for transportation. And today, if you want to keep going on to Maine, if you get on in New York, for example, you have to get off at South Station and then go uptown to North Station and get another train. Am I oversimplifying, or is that fair?
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
So
It's fair. It's fair. Either they're getting on a bus at South Station.
Right, right. So I would tell you the first time I heard about it from Mr. Bussinger, I said, "Are you serious? Are we going to dig up what we just dug up and put another tunnel?" I mean, I get the concept, but the idea of doing that all again seemed to me like it was going to make a lot of people mad. There's a plan you have to file with the Department of Transportation about what your transportation priorities are for federal dollars. And it had been on the plan for a long time until there was a new rule imposed that you actually had to show you had a funding strategy for each project. And it has come off because we don't have a funding strategy for it. It's hugely expensive. I get the economics of it and the conceptual wisdom of it, but I don't have a plan for it, to be perfectly candid. It's not that I'm opposed to it, it's just that there's some other things ahead of it on the list.
Thank you. Just, no, I'm sorry, we just have one question per person. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right here.
Governor Patrick, my name is Craig Altimos. I'm a joint degree between the Kennedy School and the law school,
Craig?
and I'm from
Yeah.
New Jersey.
Hey.
I'm actually with Peter, and I wanted to thank you very much for agreeing to meet with us. And I just want to apologize for the apparent sense of urgency. The reason we feel such a sense of urgency to meet with you is because, as you know, the leaders of the world are gathering in December
In
to
Copenhagen.
negotiation.
Sure.
And most people believe that those talks are supposed to end in failure. And I wanted to know if you personally have any hope that the world leaders will agree to a binding treaty to reduce our carbon emissions to the levels that scientists say are safe.
Do I personally have hope? Yes, I do. I don't know enough about the status of the negotiations. I think that we would be in a better position if the climate change work that Congressman Markey and Senator Kerry and others have been working on in the Congress is enacted into law by the time of Copenhagen. And I think that a lot of us are worried, and they are worried about whether that's going to happen. And I don't want to leave either you, Craig, or Peter with the impression that I don't get the urgency of the issue. I think you know, I hope you know, in the Commonwealth, we did join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We have a record around addressing responsible energy that in 3 years I think is second to none, and I think the President's going to have something to say about that tomorrow when he is when he is here. So I get the point. It's just that I have a lot of it's not that I don't love you. I just have a lot of stuff right now. I promise I will take the meeting just as soon as I can.
Thank you for your
Okay?
leadership.
You bet. Thank you.
Right up here.
Governor Patrick, my
Hey.
name's Josh Archambault. I'm a voter in Quincy. I'm also
Josh.
a second-year student here at the Kennedy School.
Excellent.
There's been some of your critics have expressed concern about the fiscal responsibility on Beacon Hill. Given the public conversation that has happened in the newspapers, as well as some of your statements about the possible 9C cuts that you'll have to implement, and the drawing down of the rainy day fund over the last few years, I was wondering if you could reflect back on when you came into office and reversed Governor Romney's $383 million 9C cuts. Some of you in your administration and your supporters were very critical of him. I was wondering if you would go back and flip that over or not.
No. You know what? I appreciate the question very much, Josh. And does everybody know what we're talking about? So do you know what we're talking about when we say 9C cuts, 9Cs? Should I do a little background? So there is emergency power that a governor has in a fiscal emergency to reduce spending. The reason you need that emergency power is that we have a constitutional requirement in Massachusetts that the governor spend all of the money that is appropriated by the legislature. So you need authority in an emergency to take that spending down, and it's a standing rule limited to certain agencies within the executive branch. Not all public spending, but certain executive branch spending. Right before he left office, what Josh is referring to is that Governor Romney imposed 300 and change, almost $400 million in 9C cuts, and because he forecasted that the revenue projections would be short. And I reversed that because we had different forecasts, and in fact, we were right. The forecasts were consistent with that. So, the point here is not just budgetary management, it's a difference in values. It's an interest and difference in values. You can say all day long that we should cut human services, we should cut education, and if you think about this just as line items on the spreadsheet, it leads you to one set of conclusions. But if you think about people who are needing services and depending on them and have their best chance or only chance behind those line items, or students in school who are looking for the opportunities that come from a good education, you think twice about how and when you cut. And I will say that during a time of total fiscal calamity last year, no governor has dealt with what we dealt with last year with the economy falling down all around us. Our team was able to deliver a modest surplus by managing well and trying to deliver what services we could and deliver them well under the circumstances. And I feel very proud of that. Thank you.
Right up here.
Governor Patrick, thank you for coming. My name is Devin Romano. I'm
Devin?
a master's in public policy student here at the Kennedy School.
Great.
And I'm actually from Mansfield and ran for the State House last year, and I wanted to thank you and your team for your support in that endeavor.
You going to do it again?
Well, we'll see. I'm not announcing now, but one of the most important issues in that campaign was health care. And obviously it has high relevance right now, and given what's going on in Washington, and given that in Massachusetts we have the only near universal system in the country, what is your assessment of the Massachusetts healthcare bill or healthcare system? What is its strengths and weaknesses, and what are your recommendations for its possible implementation or something looking like it in Washington?
Goodness, I thought you said one question per customer.
Yes, I'm a weak guy.
So I'm very proud of healthcare reform here in Massachusetts, both its concept and its implementation. Its concept, and kudos to a Democratic United States senator, a Republican governor, and Democratic legislative leadership, business interests, providers, everybody in the whole chain. coming together and making a choice that was different from what we thought were the usual choices, which was between a perfect solution and no solution at all. And we stepped out there, and that broad coalition has stayed together to adjust as we've gone along. And I think it is no small achievement that 97.4 or 5% of the people in the Commonwealth are insured today and don't have the anxieties that people without insurance don't. I think there was a judgment, I know there was a judgment made by those framers to deal with coverage before cost. And a couple myths about Massachusetts healthcare reform. It added in aggregate about 1% to state budgeting. About 1%. The problem of escalating premiums is a problem independent of healthcare reform and experienced universally. I frankly don't even understand it, and I've had some of the best insurers and analysts and so forth sitting with me, how everything else is going down or flat, and premiums go up 15, 20%, year after year after year. And I think there has to be some account for that. And I think in particular, small businesses and individuals need some relief, and we took some steps on this just this last week. I think cost control continues to be a big challenge. So now to what's going on at the federal level. First of all, we've never gotten as far as we've gotten at the federal level. You know, there is actually going to be a debate and a vote in the full bodies of the House and the Senate. We've never been this close. And it's hard to react, really, because it's still so squishy. You know, it's still so unformed. The idea of a hybrid system like we have in Massachusetts, I get that. And I think that that has worked here. I think that the idea of trying to do coverage and cost control at the same time is unavoidable, but a big pickup. It's one of the reasons why I have a lot of interest in the public option, and I wish we had one in Massachusetts, to tell you the truth, because I just am interested in how, if we're going to have a market-based solution, how you insert some things in the market that sort of force a different kind of competition and reduce costs. And I think that it'll be very interesting to see how what I describe as the good guys are treated in this. You know, the pioneer states, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, a couple of others that have stepped out there and invested a lot of state tax dollars in expanding healthcare, and whether in the new bills we get treated by the federal government the way the folks who haven't gone so far will be treated in terms of reimbursements. And I think that's actually a big question for the governor of Massachusetts and Wisconsin and a few other places like that. But I'm hopeful.
Governor, I know you have a very busy schedule. I've been given the mark, so we just have time for one more question.
Well, I have to take two, because I've known this guy since he was about this big.
All right, Governor, we have time for just two questions.
Okay.
Here and here.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Your Honorable Governor.
Thank you.
I'm Harry from China,
Harry.
currently a Lee Kuan Yew Fellow, studying Kennedy School.
Excellent.
And
Whereabouts in China are you from, Harry?
Shanghai.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And as what you mentioned in one of your article about in the state healthcare reform,
Yes.
Which I read especially.
Yes.
And Massachusetts model has played a very good and exemplary role for the national health reform.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I read another article by Wall Street Journal criticizing the government role in pushing for the reform.
Right.
So what's your comments?
I like what we do. Look, I think there are. I'm a capitalist. I am not a market fundamentalist. I'm a capitalist. Now, what do I mean by that? I think that the private sector and the freedom of the private sector is important in our own model of democracy and the development of the American dream. But I'm not a market fundamentalist in the sense that I don't think markets always get it right. Some do. Some say just let it happen out there and we'll get it right. And in fact, I just don't think that happens, and I think that, that healthcare is an example of how the market on its own doesn't always get it right. We spend more money per capita for healthcare in the United States. We have worse outcomes in terms of health outcomes than any Western democracy. And the solutions just have not emerged all on their own in the private market. Now, we have a hybrid system. We haven't gone, you know, in the direction of the UK or France or Canada. We have a hybrid system in Massachusetts where we create some parameters and we have some subsidies for folks who can't afford health care. And we create some expectations around healthcare, like, for example, you can't be kicked off your policy because you get sick or because you had a condition before you became insured, and things like that. And I think that's right. And I think if it were left to the market, and the market has shown us this, if it were left to the market would make rational decisions to leave those folks behind. And there are simply some things that matter to all of us. You know, Barney Frank had the best description of government I have ever heard when he said, government is the name we give to the things we choose to do together. And there are some things, it seems to me, we should choose to do together, and healthcare, protecting health, is one of them. Thank you, Harry.
This will be the last question.
Amen.
How are you?
Well, we've known each other about 30,
Something
a little
like
more
that.
than 30 years.
So be kind.
I shall try.
Okay.
I'm a master's candidate back here through the Harvard Extension School.
All right.
Writing my thesis on the history of marriage in America as one of your justices of the peace. But I'm also chairman of the board of the Boston Learning Center. And Governor, I've come to inform you that we wish to give you our very first Sustained Motivation Award. And hopefully Ben Affleck will be at your side to get his too. I just met with him yesterday. 2 points. I've accepted your challenge, Governor. I've accepted your challenge, Governor, from this summer when I asked you why we couldn't get an Olympic Games here. And you said you couldn't think of anyone better than me to put together a citizens exploratory committee to pursue the games.
Have you done that?
You betcha.
Good for you.
Now then,
What games
I'm
are we
real
going
sorry
for?
about Chicago. I'm real sorry. We're not Rio, but we're real smart around here. And with your help, I hope we can do this. And may I praise you also. I met Joe DiLorenzo from Plymouth Rock. God bless you, man. I remember at your table when we were discussing why couldn't this have been Hollywood? Right on, my brother.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Governor, thank you so much for your fine words.
Thank you, everybody. Great. It was fun. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Anyway. Nice of people to come.
Thank you, Governor, for your fine thoughts and deeds, and I wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you. Thanks again. You were terrific.